Welcome to the Property Podcast, the home of news and debate about building long-term wealth from property investment for beginners and experts alike. And now for your hosts. They may not be as cool as me, but they do know their property. It's Rob and Rob.
Welcome to the Property Podcast, episode 16. I'm Rob Bence, and joining me, as every week, is Rob Dix. Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I am really well, thank you, Rob. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic, thank you. I'm in very good form.
Well, this week, we'll hopefully both be on good form to take you through what's a very special episode, because the idea for it and some of the content from it has come from a big name in the world of property. We'll explain that in more detail later. But it's about a framework that you can use to solve any property problem that you encounter. And if you stick around, we're also going to give you a helpful tool at the end to help you analyse any potential deals you come across.
But before we get going, we always like to acknowledge the fantastic support we get on iTunes. And please continue it, because it really does make a huge difference. I know we read them out every week, but that's because we really do appreciate what you do for us. And this week is no different, so a big round of applause to the following, please. First off, PJ says, really informative yet personable. Discusses current issues and applies experiences and views to enable real understanding. I'm looking to move into property investment next year and feel the podcast has given me confidence to do so. I'm only 2 podcasts in so far and I look forward to the rest. And that's from Peter. So thank you very much, Peter. Love the Property Podcast. This is by Sophie. Sophie says, thank you, Rob and Rob, for delivering such an informative podcast. I'm 23 and hoping to get on the property ladder in the next few months. I feel more confident about doing so after listening to your shows. It's great impartial advice, which is not patronising, which I find when speaking to some other people because I'm young, and they don't necessarily think I can do it. So I've only become aware of the podcast in the last few weeks, but I'm already a hooked listener. So thank you, Sophie. And Abby says, I'm a complete newbie to all things property. I don't even own one. However, I have an avid interest and wanted to start my research and improve my knowledge on this topic. I'm lucky to have stumbled upon this brilliant podcast, which is informative yet witty, interesting and to the point. The two Robs seem so personable and friendly. They're there to help, and I feel like I've learnt tons already and I've only finished listening to 6 episodes. I especially like the resource section, which as a budding investor and a property geek in the making, in brackets hopefully, there you go Rob, there's another one, only adds to my growing list of books, websites, which I have to read. I'm also now a convert to Evernote. Thanks, Rob and Rob. This is now my favourite podcast.
Woohoo.
Thank you.
Love that.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Fantastic reviews. Some great ones. Some newbies there, but we've had a lot of experienced people leave us reviews as well. So it's great that we've got a whole broad range of people listening to the podcast. It's really good.
Absolutely fantastic to hear, and it really keeps us motivated to keep going. And Rob, I know that this week you've been speaking to someone else who ended up listening to our podcast, a Rightmove addict who we mentioned in our Rightmove episode, and you've been having a bit of correspondence since then.
Yeah, the lovely Andrea Morgan. She got in touch after we mentioned her in our Rightmove edition, because obviously she is the Rightmove addict, and she's writing a blog on us, which is fantastic. And once that's out, we'll link it to the show notes and we'll let you know as soon as it is. But she got in touch straight away. She really loves the podcast, and I'm really looking forward to getting a blog together with her and obviously Rob as well. And we'll let everybody know when it's broadcasted out there. We're excited about doing that. It's always good to make new contacts through the podcast. And, you know, that's one of the great things about this is we're speaking to so many different people, you know, newbies, super experienced people, bloggers. And this episode that's coming up is a prime example of that too.
Love to hear that. And give us an update as well on another podcast coming that you're launching to compete with the Property Podcast.
I don't think it can compete with this, but maybe an extension, a complement.
A compliment, I like that.
Property News Radio is very close to being launched now, which is great. All the artwork's done. The content for the launch episode is put together. I've just got to get myself in front of a microphone now and launch that, but the website, everything's pretty much done. So I'll let everybody know as soon as it's launched, and hopefully you can offer as much support as you've done to the Property Podcast, because it's being put out there for you. You know, it's a 15-minute episode once a week just to give you all the news you need on property investment and really digest it down so it's quick, easy to absorb, and you learn a bit more each week.
We can have a reviews battle across our respective solo podcasts.
So what have you been up to, Rob?
I've been planning for my return to the UK. Shockingly, it's not actually for another month or so yet. I just started planning ahead about all the people I need to meet, all the research I want to do, the meetings I need to set up in Evernote, of course. And I was just there for ages making a massive list of all the different things I need to do, because when I'm only in the UK for a month or two at a time. There's all the kind of property-related stuff that you really need to be on the ground for, and just the people who I've struck up relationships with through the podcast or through other means and want to actually meet face-to-face. Need to kind of really plan to fit all that stuff in. As part of that, I've been looking into a remortgage that I need to do. On one of my properties, weighing up some options about the length to fix for and all that kind of thing. And it's actually quite a good time to be doing that, because you might have seen in the last couple of weeks there have been some interesting changes in the buy-to-let market. The mortgage works have announced some headline-grabbing rates. BM have removed their minimum income requirement. That's good timing for me, but it's also promising for investors in general that willingness to lend seems to be out there again.
And the big news is when you come back to the UK, we can record a podcast in the same room.
I think we should just do that and not tell anyone and see if they can notice the difference.
It's going to be really weird.
It's going to be really weird. I'm going to have to put a top on and everything. I shouldn't reveal all this stuff. I get quite sweaty when recording.
The nerves.
Moving swiftly on.
I think we should.
What has caught your eye this week in the news?
In the news, there's a lack of surveyors. So when you get a mortgage, the mortgage company will send out a surveyor to assess the value of your property. But there is a shortage, and that's a combination of two things. One, there's less of them, and two, the market is moving. Lending is up and there's more going on. So there's a waiting list now for many people when they go to get a mortgage. So instead of it being, a few days or a week to get a valuation done, it's taken several weeks in some cases. So, which is not great, because sometimes to get a deal done, you need to rush it through quickly. The seller might need money fast, so that's what the deal is all hinging on. So it's a massive inconvenience. It's interesting, though, because the banks have created this problem for themselves, because once the credit crunch was over and they started looking at some of the values of the properties, they accused the surveyors of overvaluing property and started suing certain companies. So they wiped out quite a lot of the surveyors out the market, which has also made people reluctant to get into the market as well. So they've created their own problem. They want surveyors to do the surveys for them, but if they keep suing them, it's not going to really work. So. And I think the banks, it's quite convenient for them to go and sue the surveyors, but they knew what was going on. They were happy to lend that money.
A real bit of buck passing there, but it's possibly a challenge for investors as well, who've maybe bought at a discount and they're trying to get something revalued. Because if you're trying to persuade the bank that your property's worth a certain price, if you've now got a surveyor who's terrified of being sued, they're going to be less inclined. They're not going to have much of a motivation to agree with you. They might try and keep the value low to cover their own back. So it's not a particularly helpful culture, I don't think, all this blame game. But hopefully now the market started moving and there's a bit more confidence, we'll actually see a proper number of surveyors and they won't be too reluctant.
And we'll link to that in the show notes, of course. So if you go to the Property Podcast /16, you will find the show notes there.
Well, let's move on then to our topic of the week. And we're talking about how to solve any property problem. We're going to be giving you a framework for doing that. But it's quite interesting how this episode came about, because we were contacted by a chap called Mark Alexander, who runs a really big property website called property118.com. We'll be linking to that as well, of course. He contacted us because he heard the work that we did on the podcast and he wanted to get involved, and we're really happy to do that. He's written a blog for us, which is going to be up in the show notes as well. He's now running Property 118 full-time and he's retired from his day job and he's just got his property portfolio. But previously he hit upon this formula for uncovering the solutions to problems when he was working, and he got it from Dale Carnegie, who we mentioned in last week's episode as the author of How to Win Friends and Influence People, which we said that you should read. As part of one of the other books he wrote, he came up with this formula which we're going to run through now. And first of all, explain what that is and then run through how you might be able to relate it to any property problems you encounter.
So thank you, Mark, for this episode, because you made it easy for us. We've not had to do any thinking here. You've done it for us. So the Dale Carnegie approach to solving problems. And obviously this can hugely relate to property, because in property, from time to time, things will go wrong. There's no property investment that is completely hands-off. Occasionally there's going to be a challenge or a problem that needs solving. So you can apply this formula, which is fantastic. And I've not actually come across it before until Mark brought it to our attention, to solve these problems. So what you need to do is get a piece of paper and draw a cross. So you've got 4 boxes. And in one corner, write problem. The second corner, write cause. The third, write options. And the fourth, choice. So that's problem, cause, options, and choice. And then you'll go into each box. And first of all, you'll write out your problem in full. So you get it out your head and down onto paper. Now, that action alone can really help. I find that writing my goals, my to-do lists down, things like problem solving. If you start taking out your mind down into paper, it can really just help you get clarity on a subject. So first of all, that's a great start. So get your problem down. Second, start listing the causes behind this problem. It may be one, it may be several. So write them all down. Again, this just helps you focus on what's happening and how to best approach it. Then third, you get to your options, okay? It's options for a reason. There's often more than one way to approach a problem or a challenge that you have. So list them all out. Even if you don't think some of them are great, list them all out, because often what I'll find is when I'm brainstorming, I'll write something down that might not be fantastic at first, but then it'll give me an idea onto something that's even better. So make sure you list out all your options. And then finally, your choice. What are you going to do? So pick your choice on how you're going to move forward. It was interesting, Mark, when he used to run one of his businesses, said that when any of his team used to come to him with a problem or a challenge that needed addressing, he'd give them a box, draw it out, write the problem, cause, options, choice, and get them to go away. And he said quite often they wouldn't come back because by using this method, they'd work it out for themselves. So it's something I'm going to be implementing in my business because I think that was a great tip.
It's one of those really deceptively simple things where it's like, how can drawing a few boxes and write a bit of stuff down help? But it really does. So let's give an example related to property about how this might apply. Let's say that your problem that you're going to put down in box 1 might be my portfolio is not generating enough cash. Cash flow is poor. Maybe your rents are only just covering your mortgages, or maybe you're actually having to subsidise that portfolio. So that's the problem. The cause could be a lot of different things. It could be that the rents you're charging are too low. It could be that the mortgages that you've got are uncompetitive. You're having to pay out a lot in interest. It could be that you're experiencing voids. Your properties are empty a lot of the time. And that kind of leads to a separate analysis of its own to find out why. So if voids is your problem, that becomes the problem in another analysis to find out why that is. Another cause could be that you're constantly having to do maintenance that's eating into your profits, or that you've just got too much borrowing. So they're all the potential causes you've got. And then you can look at your options. So what options have you got in this situation? Well, maybe you could raise the rents. Maybe you could use some savings you've got to pay down the debt. Maybe you could remortgage onto a more competitive product that will be cheaper and you'll reduce your interest payment. Maybe you could even sell a property. If you're getting a lot of maintenance, you could do some preventative work to cut down on that and stop that eating into your profits. Or maybe you could try to appeal to a different type of tenant and do some refurbs to spend a bit of money now to allow you to charge a premium rent in the future. So there's just some of the different options you've got. And then the final box is your choice. You can choose which one to explore. Like Rob said earlier, just the process of going through that, writing everything down, will make you maybe uncover causes and possible solutions that you weren't aware of. And also just make you feel better about it because you've gone from this really big, overwhelming problem where it's like, oh God, this is costing me money, I don't know what to do, to, oh, I've now got this big list of options and I can choose which one to pursue to solve my problem.
That's one example, but we'll give you another one just so that the point hits home. And what we'll do in the blog post, in this post that we're going to do, we'll draw a diagram of this box, but it's really simple. It's just 2 lines. But if you want to see it, go to the Property Podcast /16, where you can see this post and the link to Mark's blog post that he's done for us as well, which is on our website. Okay, so what happens if your tenant wants to leave? Now, that's a problem. That's a challenge. So you need to address that. So the problem is quite clear. Your tenant's leaving. So that means that you're going to potentially have your property empty if you don't address it. So what's the cause? Is it that the family has grown in size and they need to move on, a change in circumstances perhaps? Maybe they're moving area, things out of your control. Or is it something that's within your control? Is the cause that the property's become a bit tired and the tenants want to move out because it's not as nice as it once was? Or are there noisy neighbours that's really put them off? Is that an issue? There's a few things that it could be, so don't just make an assumption, list them out. The options you have, well, again, it depends on the cause. If it's the tenant's changing circumstances, well, then your options are to contact the letting agent straight away and get it marketed during their notice period. So hopefully you have a tenant in by the time they're ready to leave, so you don't have a void period. If you've got a good letting agent who's on the ball and the market's moving, then that's easily doable. If it's the property is tired, then you need to look at that. Put the investment into the property. Tenants are people. They want to live in nice places. You might even find that by addressing the quality of the property that your tenants then change their mind and decide to stay. So if you think your property's a little tired and that's potentially the reason why the tenants are moving out, even though they've not said it, go and do it. You might find that they'll then stay. And even if they don't, it's going to make it a lot easier to find your next tenant. If it's noisy neighbours, then you might need to address that with the local authority, the council, or even the police, depending on the scale of the problem. Find out for yourself, go to the property, experience what's going on. Or if you manage this process, get your letting agent to go to the property and find out what's going on. So they're your options. And then finally, it's making your choice. So whichever one it is, you can then say, okay, well, out of all the options, this is the best choice and this is the plan of action, and then move forward. So get your problem down, write out the causes or the potential causes, the most likely ones, list all your options. No option is a bad option. You're only making a list. You're not necessarily taking action at that point. And then finally, execute your choice. What are you going to do about it?
So what I really like about this is you can relate it to absolutely anything. And what it's really doing is giving you a structure to stop freaking out and being paralyzed by the problem and start generating potential solutions. And in property in particular, problems can seem really overwhelming because often the amounts of money are pretty huge and you're dealing with people who you might have problems with, tenants or lenders sending you nasty letters or whatever it is, but you've got pressure being put on you and it just feels quite scary sometimes. And so by having this framework, it encourages you to really get down to the root of the issue, come up with ideas for what to do next. And when you've got ideas to follow up, it's like, okay, I feel like I've got some things that I can do now. It's not that I've just got this big overwhelming problem that I just want to put my head in the sand and forget about. And just by having all those ideas, it might be the case that you've got a big list of options and you want to work through them until you find the right one. Or, like Mark said, often happened when he gave this framework to people, the right course of action might just jump out and then you know exactly what you're meant to be doing next. And I really love this because it's all about generating ideas. Generating ideas gets easier with practice, and this is all about practicing that process. And there's a blogger who I really enjoy reading called James Altucher. And one of his things is he says you should come up with 10 ideas per day on a certain subject that you give yourself, just to get yourself in the habit of coming up with ideas and get better at that process. So I think this is a really great thing to try if you've got any kind of problem, maybe not the kind of the big property problems we're talking about, but just anything in your life, just to get into the habit of doing it and get used to coming up with ideas.
Yeah, and to extend on what you've said, Rob, when problems happen, or challenges, depending on your choice of language. When a challenge happens in property investment, you can do one of two things. You can decide to wrap yourself within the problem or the challenge and get really involved, or you can extract yourself from it and use a process like this. Look down on your problem, look down on the challenge that you have and say, okay, well, this is what it is, and almost emotionally remove yourself from it. Pretend you're advising somebody else. Because if you invest emotion into any of these situations, then it becomes a lot harder to deal with. So by executing this problem-solving strategy that Mark's given us, we can find that a lot easier to do. Remove yourself and almost analyse it as if you're doing it for someone else. You'll find it a lot easier. So it's a sort of an extra tip to think about. Try and remove yourself from the situation and almost as if you were advising someone else. What would you tell them to do?
Having the investor mentality and not being too close to the problem really helps as well, not getting too wrapped up in it. So if you want to see an illustration of this process drawn out, you can go to the show notes, and while you're there, make sure you read the blog post that Mark's kindly written for us as well. There's actually far more content in that post as well. This is just the one part of it that we picked out that we wanted to share with you on the podcast. So that is at thepropertypodcast.com/16. And so let's get moving on, Rob, to our resource of the week.
When Mark got in touch, we were talking on the phone for some time, and he was guiding me through Property 118. I was familiar with it already, but he wanted to point out some of the things he was really proud of. And one of the things that he drew my attention to was the landlord's calculator. Now, we're going to have this as the resource of the week, and the link's in the show notes so you can go and have a look. But the landlord's calculator is a great tool. What you do is you begin on page 1. And you input the data, so you say what the property value is and what you're receiving in rent, and you press next, and it'll then start working out different formulas for you. So things like your return on equity, your gross yields, but it goes page after page, and it gives you more and more information. And then at the end, you can get it all sent to you in an email if you wish as well, so it's easy to digest. But I thought it was really good because I've seen tools do things separately, work out your return on equity or work out your gross yield. But it's good that this tool goes through them all. So you can go to one place and type in your numbers and get the report sent to you at the end. I think it's a fantastic tool and a real time saver.
Yeah, the thing I liked about it as well is that it explains what all the different calculations mean while it's doing them for you. So it'll say, this is your return on investment, also known as return on capital, blah, 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 blah. People throw around these numbers like yield and ROI and stuff like that. A lot of the time, it's actually the same concept, but with about 5 different names for it to make you think you're missing out on something when actually you're not. It feels quite complicated, and so it's a nice way of breaking it down. Like, a lot of experienced investors will have their own spreadsheets that calculate all this stuff, and they've got it tailored to their specific circumstances. But if you're at the stage where you don't have that in place yet, you just want to run some basic numbers to analyse a deal or look at how properties you've already got are performing for you, it's a really nice, easy way of having that all in one place. So that is the landlord calculator from Property 118, and we're going to be linking to that in the show notes, of course.
Rob, that's another episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you, Mark, for getting in touch and making this episode happen. You made our lives very easy, and the tool that you gave us is excellent, so we do appreciate that. But before you go, if you haven't left us a review yet and you're enjoying this show, please do so. Rob's made a video to show you exactly how to do it, but it's going to take no more than 2 minutes of your time. And it makes a big difference because if you found it and you find it useful, then by leaving a review, you'll help other people find it. And, you're building a community here. There's tens of thousands of people who listen to this every month, but let's grow it. Let's build this community. It's fantastic. And talking of communities, Rob, next week's episode is...
It's the live show.
It's about to be recorded, yeah.
We've been talking about this for a couple of weeks, and it's the live show, live and unedited, where we spend half an hour taking listener questions without any prep or any technology to aid us. So definitely tune in next week. Even if you're not a regular listener, you might want to hear how we stand up to that.
We might enter the podcast into the comedy section next week. You can have a laugh at our expense. So we're recording that live this week, and you'll be able to hear that next Thursday, as always, when we release the podcast. So make sure you download that one, because at the very least, you'll have a giggle.
Of course, if you missed out on the chance to get involved at this time, and we'll hopefully be doing similar things again if we survive, the best thing to do is to join our mailing list, because our list finds out first about all the things we've got coming up. You can do that at thepropertypodcast.com.
Thank you, Mark, again for this episode. Rob, thanks for turning up again. It's very good of you. I look forward to hearing the live show go out next week.
Yeah, what can I say? It's going to be interesting. But yeah, good to talk to you, Rob. We'll do it all again next week.
Super. Cheers, Rob. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Property Podcast. Don't forget to check out the show notes and join the mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.